years. The break-even age is around 56 or 57, where the college graduate finally crosses the UPS driver. Now, forget the UPS driver, become a plumber, electrician, something that's actually a skill group. The average college kid won't catch them. There will be people who far surpass them. Now, the other thing about colleges in the old days is that that they were places where rich kids went for the most
Hmm.
part. They were sort of upper middle class and upper class, and as a consequence of that, you could study anything you want. And you didn't have a payback issue because it was stupid to study something that would not extinguish the cost of the college education, but
Right.
you could afford to do it. Um, Nowadays, it's so expensive. You go to Cornell, you major in some subject, which I'm not going to mention because I don't want to piss off the art squad. But you major in something that for which you can't identify an obvious revenue stream, right? If you come here and learn how to make robots, you're going to do fine, right? But if you come here and you study something out of the dusty archives, you're never going to extinguish your loan. And here's an interesting stat: Cornell's English department. Now I'm about to get in trouble. Cornell's English department, tenure track and tenured professor life was really miserable during COVID lockdown and stuff. And so there was this sort of relief binge spending. The numbers seem to show that they're out of money now. The numbers show that the credit card debt is starting to really ramp up. Once you start spending, it's very hard to cut back. There's a stickiness to a spending habits. It's like the person who's fat. Look at me. Um, Stopping eating is not easy, right? I mean, it becomes sort of a muscle memory, as Bill Fleckenstein would say. It's kind of a muscle memory. It's very hard to stop habits, and so that's why employees are not being laid off yet because the employers are reluctant to give up that employee who they fought hard to get back after COVID. But I think the layoffs are going to start. So I think we're headed for a disastrous
I was
period of
going to
time
say,
that's both depth and length.
does the Fed know the real numbers, what you've crunched? They obviously do.
Well, one time Greenspan got asked a question by, I don't know, Ron Paul or someone that was a kind of a question he wouldn't want to answer. And he says, "We know what you know." It was one of these, we just going to get back to historical fair value. I go, I don't. But if they don't get back to historical fair value, they're not going to get back to historical returns either. Because if you pay 35 times earnings, you're paying for 3%,
Let me throw this out to you. The perception though, right, to the general public goes, the stock
right?
market is ripping. Everything is great.
Right?
So would he really want to deflate it?
Because eventually it ends up in tears. I've been saying this on Twitter for the last couple of weeks. There is no example of an overvalued market that didn't eventually return to fair value, if not lower. There's no example. It's sort of like saying there's no example of a currency that didn't eventually die. It's a truism. So Powell's sitting there looking and say, this thing's got a 70%. Great example, stupid examples. Microsoft is 10x over the last 10 years. During that time, their revenues grew 60%. 10x gain on a 60% revenue growth, which is basically inflation, right? And but it also means that 5x is expansion of valuation. Valuations always eventually, when you have a consumer credit bubble that bursts, no one has any money to buy anything.
So let's wrap this point with how you started it when you said you believe that the recession started long ago. So if we're already
Could.
in it,
Mm-hmm.
where do we go now? What happens?
Well, at some point, the markets someone finally figures out that inflation is going to ramp up again. This multi-phase inflation run that's
Yeah.
now a pretty popular plot, and I think Roach put it out first. Maybe Larry Summers jumped in quickly, and repeated it. Now it's everywhere. I think that's probably true, and I think Powell's terrified of inflation getting a grip on the system again. He's worried he's going to make the same mistake that Volcker actually made, in which he tried to let up on the brake. and all of a sudden it took off again, and he had to hammer it even harder. And so I would have to say that at some point inflation is going to box us in such that the Fed can no longer become just a free money. The phrase "there's no free lunch" is true.
Star candidate, maybe it is Michelle Obama, but does it not just come down to Michigan, Dave? And who could beat Trump in Michigan?
I think Trump could win 45 states if they counted the votes. Biden is truly, truly awful. He can't put together a coherent sentence. When Putin did his interview and he did 15 minutes of history, and everyone said, "Oh, what's Putin doing? Stalin." What Putin was doing is showing a juxtaposition of his capacity to be coherent on detail for 15 minutes compared to Joe Biden. That's what I think Putin was doing.
And
And
now today,
so,
Biden called them an SOB. I don't know if you saw that
right,
headline.
right.
Yeah.
I've written in favor of Russia and the Ukraine war, so I'm really a contrarian on that one. But Biden, they can't put him in front of a camera. They can't put him in front of children. There's now guys coming out saying, "I've got 17 hours of tapes recording of the Burisma scandal." These are all, Biden has committed more crimes than any president, and that includes Clinton. And I think that's a crime family. I don't put them high up on the. So I don't see how I don't see how you can possibly vote for Biden. You could. So I think time is going to be the enemy of the investor. Time scares me more than price. So I got some crap from a very famous European money manager who has been very supportive. And he said, "I think you've lost your edge because you're worried about all this other crap." I got about a 5 or 6% return last year. I will take 5 or 6% all day long if I'm actually hedged against catastrophe. So if I can get 5 or 6% while being totally protected from what I fear is coming, oh, that's spectacular. My best decade, I had a typically good decade, the 80s. You couldn't not make money in the 80s. I had a great 90s because I was actually a tech bull, believe it or not. My best decade compared to everybody else on the planet was the noughts. While they were getting hit with two bear markets, I made 13% a year for 10 years compounded. The teens up to the present, I sucked because I believed we were not done in 08, 09. I believed we had another halving in front of it. I don't think GLD is backed by gold. I read the prospectus. It was like, we'll have some over here, we'll have some over there. It sounded awfully
Right.
fractional reserve to me. So I think GLD was put into place to A, make someone some money, and B, to absorb demand.
Right. Well, that's why you want to own
So
physical gold.
right. So the crypto ETF is absorbing crypto into the normal world, which I think is a loser. So I think the crypto guys should not be enthusiastic about the ETF. I was watching Max Kaiser the other day, who's certainly visible in that world.
Who's that?
Talking, yeah, who's that? Right, who's that? I've done some podcasts with him. We get along okay. Talking about how the ETF's going to hurt people. And I think the serious Bitcoin guys are going, you got to have your own codes. Don't be exposed to counterparty risk.
Right. Right.
And so I think they're going to do a battle with the state. You watch Christine Lagarde or Yellen, and they occasionally say things that are kind of shots across the bow, saying at some point we might hurt you. At some point they're going to try, in my opinion.